All right, folks. We're going to do the unthinkable. We're going to try tonight to get off to a better start than the Indiana basketball team, all right?
Impossible.
So we're not going to have technical difficulties. We're not going to curse. We're not going to stumble and mumble over our words. That's the podcast equivalent of a good start. And that's what we're going to try to give you tonight on episode 182 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for IU sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on February 16th, 2021, where I'm your host, Nithin Krishnan, and with me tonight is usual podcast co-host Matt Lukens. It looked like, Matt, I had a brief turnover there. It's okay. We're just going to power through it. How are you doing on this Tuesday night? Apparently, in Florida, they didn't have a huge snowstorm. That's what I hear.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to rub it in everybody's faces, but it was 86 and sunny yesterday. So while you guys were dealing with the snowstorm, I could have been at the beach. Was I at the beach? No, I was in my house doing what I normally do, just sitting at this computer looking up statistics and stats and wondering about this Indiana basketball team, which has been a bit confusing. Actually, not that confusing. They're pretty predictable. Last week, I predicted us to beat Northwestern, and I said there's no way we beat Ohio State. And they went out on Saturday and showed you why I thought there was no way that we beat Ohio State. And then they had to give me a heart attack the previous game with Northwestern. All credit to them. They played like absolute... You know what I was going to say. They played terribly. Right? I'm not cursing. We're not turning over.
No. We're good start. Good start's the theme tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, but they, did not start well that game, but they finished that game strong. They had a much better second half. They actually won in overtime, which is a weird thing that happened. And they pulled out a victory. So we went 1-1 last week. And honestly, in the Big Ten, right now in this conference, you have to beat Northwestern. They lost 10 in a row. But to go 1-1 this week, not the end of the world. You're losing to an on-fire Ohio State team, and you're beating a team that you should beat. Made it a lot harder than you needed to be, but mission still accomplished. So not a terrible week, just a weird couple games, right, Nithin?
Yeah, weird couple games. Indiana on Wednesday night last week knocked off Northwestern 79-76. It was that weird tea time start, that 4:30 p.m. Central Time tip up in Evanston. And, well, glad it started that early, because it went into double overtime, or else we would have been up until the wee hours in the morning. IU needed 2 overtimes. The MVP of that game was Al Durham, which I think is the first time we've said that all season. Maybe 1 or 2 other games throughout, but he had 24 points, a bunch of key free throws down the stretch. Armon Franklin chipped in. Mm-hmm. We'll say added 23 points. I don't think it was quite a chip in. I think he and Al Durham were sort of leading the way against the Wildcats, and those much maligned guards combined for 54 of Indiana's 79 points. So that's a big number. You'll take that every day of the week. But Matt, once again, Indiana got off to a slow start, even against Northwestern, and it continued against Ohio State. IU dropped 21 of the first 28 points. They went down 21-7 to Northwestern. And the reason I predicted the Wildcats were going to win last week is I thought this was a Northwestern team that was going to play desperate, and they were going to look at Indiana as a team they'd already beaten this season.
They did play desperate, though.
And they did. Yeah. And, well, here's the problem. Okay, you came back and won, but that can sometimes mask your problems. And, Matt, we saw it happen again on Saturday in Columbus. Let's cut to the chase. What the hell is going on with these starts, Matt? I mean, Indiana's got a bunch of quality basketball players who have been in the system for a long time. Why can't they start games better?
Yeah, it's the starting lineup. It's the combination of the 5 starting players. There's a problem with this team. So they get off to slow starts. Trey Jackson-Davis, our best player, right? Our rock. Really struggles the beginning of games. It's a weird issue that he has. I know Archie was talking about it. He thinks it's like a mental thing. It's really like he's feeling out the game. It's really weird. If he gets off to a good start, he usually has a great game. If he gets off to a rough start, he usually has an okay game, right? Like a bad game for Trace is an okay, like a really good game for most people. But, we really need him in some games. Against the Northwestern game, he only had 10 points, right? He didn't have his best game. Against Ohio State, he had 23. He was basically the entire team, but he probably should have had more, especially off the start he had it. And then the two other problems, Nithin, I'm sure we'll talk about this. Al Durham had a great game against Northwestern. Against Ohio State, he's a senior guard. He has 7 points. He's 2 of 8 from the field. Not great. The other guard I'm going to talk about is Rob Finney. Both of them have been the problems, both upperclassmen guards. These are your guys that you're expecting come out and kind of give you a nice foundation, be the concrete slab of the team. Just show up and give you something that you're going to get night in and night out. We don't know what we're going to get from Rob Finney night in and night out. We don't know what we're going to get from Al Durham night in and night out. You might get 24-point Al Durham, and you also might get 2-point Al Durham. You might get 2-point Rob Finney. You might get 14-point Rob Finney. We don't know what you're going to get. And the problem is, as they come out and they look sluggish, they're slow, their decisions are not particularly on point, especially at the point of attack when you're talking about Rob Finney, taking whether it's off ball screens, whether it's off dribble handoffs. It's a really delayed stuff, and it almost looks choreographed coming out of the start or
out of the gate. Yeah,
it's really weird which is also something strange because we're scoring like off of 260 possessions that we've had off of timeouts. We have like 260 points. That's a good return off of timeouts. That's 1 point off of every timeout. That's 1 point per possession is a good number.
Yeah.
So you would think off the start of games, we would start off,
right.
Okay, we're going to run this play against the defense. Let's get a good shot.
Right.
That's just not the case right now with this team. And I really do think it belongs with a bit of ineptitude when it comes to running an offense. And sadly, the offense has been the problem throughout the entire tenure of Archie Miller.
Yeah, it has. It reminds me a little bit of a football team, even at the pro level, that sort of scripts the first 10 to 15 plays before, adjusting for the game. And you would think with this coaching staff and with this system and with the relative experience of the guys on the team, let's take the 4 freshmen out of it, but, everyone else who's been in here now for at least a couple of years, that Indiana would be a better on-script team for the start. So here are the numbers. Okay, it was a 17-4 hole against Iowa. Indiana came back and won. I get it. 17-4. 21-7 at Northwestern, and then 21-6 at Ohio State. And the question everyone's asking is, why hasn't there been a lineup change yet? And well, Archie Miller was asked that question earlier today in a meeting with the media, a pregame setup before Wednesday's game against Minnesota. And Archie said, look, it's a matter of missed shots. It might be a confidence thing. And he said, hey, making a change can hurt the team's confidence level as much as it can help it. He said pretty explicitly not to expect a change to the lineup against Minnesota. However, we still hit the Twitter poll because we know that IU fans, by and large, would like to see something change. And we went out and asked, hey, folks, if there was something you would change to the lineup, what would you do? And the options were you can remove one of the guards, you can remove one of the forwards, you can make multiple changes, or do nothing. And 70%, officially 68% of our responses said remove one of the guards. Make a guard switch, take out either Rob, Al, or Armand, and put in probably Christian Lander. You might think about putting Anthony Leal in. The second largest response was make multiple changes. That was 16%. 14% said do nothing. So let's go straight to the responses, Matt. I promised our followers if you gave a non-vulgar answer, you would get a shout out on this podcast. So here we go. Rapid fire. Cult of Colt said Christian, and he said Christian 17 times. He goes Christian. Okay, so he wants Christian Lander. All right, Justin Ferguson said more importantly is the lineup that finishes, but as the minutes go, I think we need to significantly reduce the time with Al and Rob in at the same time. Nightman 859 said, I wonder if starting Jerome Hunter over Race Thompson would space out the floor more for Trace Jackson Davis to work inside. That's something to think about. There seems to be quite a bit of chemistry with Race Thompson and Trace Jackson Davis, but it doesn't hurt to give it a shot. That's how I look at it. If you need to mix something up. Kyle Mills wants to bring Finney off the bench and start Lander. Darren Engelhart says the slow starts and non-aggressive play are demoralizing, and that's almost more important than the actual score, right? That's something you got to think about. It's one thing to notice that you're down 8 or 10 or 12 early. It's just got to take an impact on you mentally in this Big Ten grind. I liked what Dylan Everidge said. He said replace Rob with either Christian or Anthony. That seems like a prevailing sentiment across IU fans. Robert Foos would start Jordan Geronimo. Miles Babcock would take out Rob and let Lander start. BK Hoosier thinks it should be a Lander, Franklin, Durham, Hunter, and Jackson Davis start. And the one I liked was our friend Ant Wright. Was our friend Ant Wright, who could be on our podcast next week. He said, forget the starting lineup. Indiana might want to think about tanking for John Beilein. So, Matt, out of all those responses you heard, what stands out to you? It seemed like there were a few different options there. Starting Christian Lander, thinking about starting Jerome Hunter. There was even a shout out for Jordan Geronimo. What sort of clicks for you as you think about these options?
Yeah, looking at it, I see the Christian Lander, but I think throwing him in there at the beginning of the game, especially with how inconsistent he has been on defense. And as a freshman, I think that's a lot to put on his shoulders. I think playing him starters minutes, absolutely, right? I know, I forget the name of the person who said all that matters is the lineup that ends. Welcome to, you want to be on the podcast? That's you're stealing the words out of my mouth. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Like I think Lander should be in the final unit there, especially for what he brings in the offense. However, I heard a couple people with a great idea, which was bring Jerome into the starting lineup. I like that idea. However, not for Race Thompson. I think Race Thompson's one of the best players on this team, and he's really important for what he brings on the defensive end. He's also a pretty good offensive player if they give him the ball. Anyways, Jerome, for somebody like Al or Rob, bring one of those two out and play Jerome at the 3. Because I think Jerome, especially recently, you look at Northwestern game, 7 points, 2 of 5, 1 of 3 from 3. Even Ohio State, he's the only other person that scored double digits with Trace. He had 10 points that game, 3 of 7, 2 of 4 from 3. Like, he's an actual threat from the outside. He has a bit of a perimeter game. He can post up. You can bring Race Thompson out to the perimeter a little bit because he's a really good passer, and then you can threaten that high-low passing action with Race and Trace, and all of a sudden the offense kind of opens up there. I would like to see that. You can run the ball through somebody like, I don't know, one of our best passers of the ball. That's Arvon Franklin, or you can bring in Christian and play. Or you can run Al, who's been running point. There's a bunch of little different ways you can play that offense. Mm-hmm. I really like that lineup to start the game. I think it does everything. Even Jerome, he has some defensive lapses, but he's a long, lengthy defender, so he's still going to be a tough matchup, and he can close out pretty well to any shooter. So I like that. I think that idea is something that I would give Archie a lot of credit for trying.
Yeah. And
doghouse recently, right?
Yeah, he has. And Hunter just came back from his 2-game absence and had a good game against Ohio State. And Northwestern hit that huge step back 3 to help beat the Wildcats. The person you gave a shout out to was Justin Ferguson, who said they should the lineup that finishes matters the most. Yeah. Dylan Everidge also said bringing Rob Finney off the bench could kickstart him, and this is where I want to sort of get into it with you a little bit, Matt, because if you bring Rob Finney off the bench, I think that could serve as a short-term spark for him. In the meantime, give Christian Lander a shot. And I understand he's going to have some bad games, but Rob Finney's gone through a stretch here where he's got zeros on the stat sheet.
Yeah.
For the entirety of the contest. And I know some of you let me ask you this. Let's throw some grades out here. If you grade Rob Finney out of 10 on offense, what would you give him? And on defense, what would you give him?
On offense, like a 3. And on defense, like a 7.
And meanwhile, I would give Christian Lander like a 7 on offense and like a 4 on defense. Okay. And here's the thing. When it comes to some of his defensive weaknesses, you still could have guys like Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson bail you out if you get beat on drives. And it's not pretty, it's not perfect, but overall, like on the balance of things, not only could Christian Lander help you get off to a better start, but bringing Rob Finney off the bench could make his life easier. I mean, after all, just think about this game coming up on Wednesday against Minnesota. If Finney comes into the game when the Gopher star guard Marcus Carr sits for a few minutes, Finney can get into the groove. He can maybe figure out something that's working for him and then still end up playing some 20, 25 minutes. So, I think there's a lot to look at there. The starting lineup, there needs to be a change. And that's why we titled it in our podcast. And I know Archie Miller is not going to use that option, at least for the Minnesota contest. But if you ask me, Lander for Finney is where I would go. Matt, you basically said you want to see Jerome Hunter in for Rob Finney. Is that how do I have that right?
Yeah, I think bringing Rob off the bench is a very good idea. And we didn't talk about this before the podcast, but yeah, I agree with you. Like bringing him off the bench would kickstart him. Giving him a little bit of an easier matchup would be nice. And then what he's going to bring on defense. So kind of maybe even giving a little bit of a surprise to the other starting guard by leaving him in, going, oh, it's not Lander anymore. I actually have to focus on my ball handling and there's a little bit more pressure that comes with Rob. So
that's something that crossed my mind the other day too after the Ohio State game, right? If nothing else, unpredictability has some value. At least
a lot of value.
Throwing a curveball, even if it's not a Clayton Kershaw curveball, can still be a useful pitch. And with Indiana, I was watching Oklahoma and West Virginia the other day after IU played Ohio State, 2 top 15 teams. Randomly in overtime, West Virginia, one of their players decided to shoot a 3 5 seconds early in the possession. He nailed it. And it's just like, I wasn't expecting him to take that shot. And I believe it was either Iowa or Michigan, maybe. It was Michigan back on Sunday. They threw a random full court press at Wisconsin, midway through the second half. And Wisconsin had a tough time handling it because they were just caught off guard. And that whole concept of just being caught off guard is something that Indiana's opponents have not had to deal with, at least, frequently. Last year or this year. So just throw something new at them, throw something they're not expecting at them. I think that alone can have some benefit. Now, let's talk about something unexpected to throw at a team like Minnesota or Michigan State on Saturday. Matt, in the last month, Indiana's played 6 Big Ten games.
Yeah.
And they're shooting 40% from 3 and 41% from 2. The 2-point percentage is basically worse than the nation. It is worse than the Big Ten. The 3-point percentage is second in the conference. Should Indiana be taking 20, 25 threes in a game? I mean, it might sound crazy to some people, but first of all, we've got to at least shoot down the narrative that this team is no longer a 3-point shooting team, right?
Yeah, no, they need to take threes. They need to take a lot of threes. I think at 15 threes, we took 52s against Ohio State, 15 threes. See how much we lost the game by? If you make 5 more threes, it's a lot closer of a game. You take 5 of those 2s, or 10. You say you take 10 of those 2s, and you make 5 of them made threes. Who knows what happens, right? There should be like an even split. If you're taking 42s, you should take 23s. That's how that should work. You're going to get more opportunities in the lane. You're going to want Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson to go to work. But for the love of God, kick it out for 3-pointers. It's what made the Ohio State offense so good. You're watching it. I commented it in Slack when we were talking about it. Ohio State runs the exact offense that Indiana should run. You look at their lineup. E.J. Liddell, yes, can shoot 3-pointers, right? But you can have that E.J. Liddell be our Race Thompson, right? Race Thompson can be the E.J. Liddell. He can step out and make a couple, or at least attempt them. Kyle Young inside can be Trace Jackson Davis. Kyle Young and had 2 assists. EJ Liddell had 2 assists. Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson should always have 2 assists because you should just be kicking it out to an open three-point shooter who'll hit the shot. We have good spot-up three-point shooters on this team too. Armand is great. Al is good. Even Rob, when he's confident, is good. Christian Lander is a good spot-up three-point shooter, at least, and Jerome Hunter is as well. Anthony Leal's a good one as well. I just named half the damn team. All right, so I don't understand.
Yeah.
And something else that drove me crazy watching Ohio State, Nithin, I don't know if you noticed this, is when Indiana likes to pick up the ball and then throw it into the post. And they like to stop the dribble and then gather and try to work it into the post. Ohio State was always working to try to move it into the post, but never picking up the dribble. They were always trying to get the angle. Their guards or wings, whoever it was always trying to get the perfect angle to get into their post player. Indiana players, for whatever reason, whether it's the offensive system or what Archie has taught them to do, really like to gather the ball before they throw it in the post, and it telegraphs it so easily. There was a couple times Christian Lander got caught doing it. Rob Finney got caught doing it. It didn't end up in a turnover. Armand Franklin ended up doing it a couple times, and Al ended up doing it a couple times. All the guards, they do this. They gather and then throw it into the post. I get that that's like the classic basketball play, but it telegraphs it to a defense, and especially one like Ohio State that's going to swarm and try to eliminate the post. That's just an easy turnover. That's an easy possession. So you need to make it a little bit, like you said, throw a curveball, make them actually guess.
Yeah,
are we going to take a pull-up jumper? Are you going to drive? Or are you going to pass it into the post? And then when you pass it into the post and they double, pass it out of the post. Pass it around. Work it around. Don't just pass it out and then run a play. Work it around the post. Work it around the perimeter. You'll find an open man for 3. And shoot it when you have it open. For whatever reason, they're like too. They seem like too coached, Nithin. They really do. They seem too programmed. It's a really weird problem.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially in a conference where every split second matters and every possession matters. In the Atlantic 10 or Conference USA, just to mention a couple, you can afford to do that sort of thing, right? You can afford to gather the ball, wait a split second, and make sure your pass is as accurate as possible, because the defenses in that league allow for that sort of thing. But in the Big Ten, where you've got basically 12 teams that are fighting for tournament spots, and even when you go all the way down to Northwestern and Nebraska, Northwestern's a team that took Indiana to double overtime and beat them earlier this year. And Nebraska's a team that almost knocked off Illinois and then did win at Penn State. Every split second matters. Every little thing matters. Every little wrinkle you can use to gain an advantage, even if you're stealing 2 points, that's invaluable in the Big Ten. And this is why I've mentioned this 3-point question for probably the second or third podcast in a row, because Indiana's got 4 guys who are shooting at least 39% from 3 in conference play. In conference play, not against Tennessee Tech and North Alabama. Against Illinois and Iowa and Michigan and Purdue. I know Indiana hasn't faced Michigan yet. They're going to. Purdue and all these type of teams. Leo, Franklin, Hunter, and Durham are all over 39%. And Franklin's done it on 44 3-point attempts so far. Durham's done it on 51 3-point attempts in conference play. This type of stuff really matters. Yeah. And if that means you shoot a hand, 5 or 6 fewer layups, you might on the top of your head go, oh, that seems a little silly. Layups are better than threes. But not when you're shooting 41% on your layups. Yeah. Or at least your 2-pointers, right? And, if Trace Jackson Davis and Race Thompson and Rob Finney and the rest of the Hoosiers were one of the best 2-point shooting teams in the country, I'd sit back and I'd say, look, you know what? This power game is working. Getting the ball close to the rim is working. Indiana does draw fouls at a very high rate across college basketball, unless they play Wisconsin. But here's the deal. Indiana does a good job getting fouled, but when your 3-point shooting is this successful, definitely consider taking more threes, because if you take more on a good night, you'll usually make more. And that's the way these things work out. Now let's talk.
And if you shoot a 3-pointer, they're easier to read, the bounces. There's a chance you can get second chance points off a 3-pointer. Some layups, some close shots, they're really easy rebounds for opposing teams. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance that off a 3-point kick out look to Christian Lander that he will seemingly clank off the iron, that Trace will be able to get a rebound and get a much easier shot than he would have if they had fed it into the post for him. So there are some positives for missing 3-pointers.
Right. And it's just funny, right? Because last year, I think a lot of IU fans cringed when they saw a 3-pointer being taken. This year, that doesn't have to be the case, right? A guy like Anthony Leal's come in and hit 41%, even if it's on just 17 attempts so far from beyond the arc in conference play. If Indiana gets good looks, they usually tend to hit him, and they don't necessarily have to be good. We saw Finney take one dribble and knock one down against Iowa late in the game a week and a half ago. It was a huge shot. And, sometimes even if it's early in the shot clock and uncomfortable, it might be a really good option for this Hoosier offense. Let's talk a little bracketology, man. I know everyone's thinking about it. I know everyone's got an eye on it. A couple weeks out from March. I'll tell you this. A few prominent bracketologists have Indiana. And as of right now, these prominent bracketologists, they've got Indiana all over the place. IU is an 8, according to Andy Katz's bracketology. And that's state-run media, if you want to call that the official March Madness account. Sent out a bracket predictor that said Indiana's an 8 seed. IU's a 10 in Joe Lunardi's bracketology. They're a 10 in Delphi's bracketology that was released on the 12th. And IU's a 12 seed and the last 4 in CBS's. Some bracket chat's always fun, Matt. Do you think this team's closer to an 8 or to a 12 right now? And make no mistake about it, you've got to win twice this week in order to sort of solidify your footing, right?
Yeah, the 2 wins is a must. I think they're closer to an 8 than they are a 12. They're a good team. They're just not where I thought they should be in year 4. That's why we had discussions about Archie and Ant is in our comments talking about they should tank for John Beeline, which I thought was hilarious. So 8 is a bit unreasonable. I don't think we're an 8 seed. We win our next 3 games in a row. Okay, Andy Katz, you're a genius. We're an 8 seed. If we figure out how to cure the false starts, the slow starts, and then also get Trace and Rob into a rhythm, all of a sudden, we're looking like an 8 seed, and we're looking like our tournament lives are going to be a lot of fun. However, like I said before, I'd much rather be a 10 seed than an 8 seed. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and that's the point I was hoping we were going to rehash once again. With Gonzaga and Baylor dominating college basketball like they are, you might benefit from getting out of those 8-9 seed lines because, if you run into a team like Gonzaga or Baylor, and we've seen how good Michigan is this season, you've got no shot in that round of 32 matchup, and that might be a little harsh. But put it this way, the difference between Gonzaga and Illinois right now, Illinois is a 2 seed. If you look at the projections, the difference between Gonzaga and Houston right now, Houston's a 2 seed in the projections, is as big of a difference, if you believe in the computers, if you believe in the analytics, between Indiana and a team like Akron or UCF, who's a little bit better than Nebraska. Okay, so put it that way. The difference between Gonzaga and Illinois, or Gonzaga and Houston, the same as the difference pretty much between Indiana and a team like Nebraska. Okay? It's not a perfect comparison, but that's the kind of difference you're talking about. So, yeah, I think Indiana is closer to an 8. And I think the $1 million question as we head closer and closer to Selection Sunday is now the committee is looking at teams that haven't loaded up their non-conference with a bunch of cupcake wins. You're going to have a lot of teams get into the tournament that are hovering around 500, and I think you're going to see a team or two that get into the tournament with a record under 500. I think you can expect that this year as long as the field stays at 68. And then you've got the whole concept of the Big Ten, and frankly, this conference will get the most bids out of any other league, and they're going to have 9 or 10 teams really in the top 40 or 45 of the KenPom ratings, and that's what the selection committee will take a look at, as well as the net rankings. And right now, Indiana is a 50 in the net rankings. However, at this point in the season, it seems like a lot of folks are poking holes in the net, in the net rankings, because a team like Colgate, I saw earlier today, is in the top 15. And if that's happening right now, either you've got to play a few more games to get that data into the system, or the selection committee is going to have to look at a lot of different factors rather than just the net. Also, Matt, if the Big Ten season ended right now, IU would be in the 8-9 game versus Minnesota, I should say, in order to face Michigan in the Big Ten tournament. There's a 3-team group, really, of IU, Minnesota, and Maryland, all fighting what it seems like for 8, 9, and 10 in the Big Ten.
Yep.
How would you feel about that Big Ten tournament situation if Indiana had to play Minnesota on Thursday in an 8-9 game and then Michigan the following day?
Well, we'll see how we play against Michigan when we play them. I have a feeling that IU is sneakily going to play them well. I like that matchup for us a lot. Weirdly enough, much more than the Ohio State matchup. So we'll see how we play them. But I would much rather play Maryland. So sneak up a spot and play Maryland on the first day than play Minnesota. I think Marcus Carr in a one-game situation is an absolutely terrifying thought. So I'd much rather play Maryland, even though we seem to play terrible against Maryland the last couple of years. But
yeah, no, I noticed that, and for Indiana to get up a spot or two and can sort of they would have to pass up a team like Rutgers or Purdue to get there. And
well we're going to beat Rutgers this week. So
well, Indiana's got a couple matchups coming up against Rutgers and Purdue, so they could do a little bit of their own work to sort of get out of that matchup with the Gophers, potentially, as we just take a long-term look here a month away from the Big Ten tournament. By the way, just noticed that Tom Crean's Georgia team looks like they're going to knock off a ranked Missouri squad. So the you rank them, we spank them mentality is carrying over there into Athens. So it's time for Who Won the Week in IU Sports. And once again, we're going to shout out the women's basketball team. They had another great run this past week. They won both of the games they played. They knocked off Penn State. They won at Illinois. It's a 4-game winning streak for the Lady Hoosiers, who now have a huge matchup against the Michigan Wolverines on Thursday. Both teams are in the top 15. That matchup is at 6 Eastern on BTN. And the Hoosiers got another home game on Sunday against Iowa. IU is going to need some help to win the Big Ten. They're going to need Maryland to trip up at some point here to grab a share of the Big Ten title. And, of course, that would require Indiana to win out. IU's currently ranked number 14 in the country, and they're a 3 seed in the ESPN women's bracketology. So you can definitely look forward to seeing them go deep in March Madness when that kicks off at the same time that the men's tournament kicks off. If you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at the Hoosier Sound, as well as at Indiana HQ. And of course, you can respond to our Twitter polls, which are taking social media by storm tonight. So let's jump into 2 huge previews. Let's not sugarcoat this, Matt. The 2 games Indiana's got coming up is setting the scene for the biggest week of the season and 2 must-win games. I'm not afraid to use that term. They're must-win contests. Don't come at me with the literal crap. The way people use the term, these are must-win games. I use a 4.5-point favorite against Minnesota on Wednesday. The over-under is 138. Brandon Gaudin and Stephen Bardo have the call at 9 o'clock Eastern time, at midnight hour. No, just kidding. 9 o'clock. Don't want to confuse people. Big Ten Network. KenPom says Indiana's going to win 71-67. Minnesota star center Liam Robbins is questionable. The Gophers are 0-7 on the road. Matt, we know Marcus Carr is Minnesota's best player. They're practically a one-man band, especially if Robbins doesn't play. How can the Hoosiers slow down Marcus Carr, and what does IU have to do to win this game?
Slow down Marcus Carr. We need, one, Christian Lander to play his best defense. He's played up to date because Marcus is going to want to seek out Lander when he plays and he's on the court. And then also we're going to need Rob Finney to play a good offensive game because we're going to need a lot of minutes from Rob. Like Christian's going to have a hard time guarding somebody like Marcus, especially as a freshman. He'll learn a lot from this game, which is great for him. But as a must-win, we definitely need our junior point guard, almost 3-year starter now, to come out and play really good defense and give us some solid offensive contribution.
Yeah, and remember, this is a matchup that IU won both times last season, including a huge win in Minneapolis. That came in February of 2020 before the world ended. Trace Jackson-Davis had a huge game, 27 points, 16 rebounds against Daniel Oturu, who's now off to the NBA. Jackson-Davis was a key factor in this season's series. Last season, Joey Brunk was as well, but of course it does not seem like Brunk will be available for Indiana going into this game on Wednesday. Carr struggled against IU last year. He played a ton, but he couldn't really find his groove. But this season, he's taken another step forward. He is only shooting 37% in Big Ten play, but he's scoring 19 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 5 assists. All numbers that you see with Marcus Carr, basically top 10 in the conference, if not even higher than that. Things to watch for, though. Minnesota doesn't take many threes, and they don't give up many threes. So when you think about that, it should play into IU's strengths. IU should be able to get good looks inside, especially if center Liam Robbins does not play for Minnesota. The turnover game should favor Minnesota. So if Indiana can win that battle, which they did not do against the Buckeyes, If Indiana can win that battle against Minnesota, let's talk about the turnovers for a second, Matt. IU struggled with it a lot against Ohio State. And the way I saw it, it seemed like it was just a little bit of carelessness more than Ohio State's defense really forcing it. Did you see it that way also?
Yeah, it was carelessness combined with a bit of sluggishness. It was like a weird brand of ineptitude, really, because it was like they would seem to like try to throw the ball into the post, but then they wouldn't put a lot of effort behind it, and then they would also hesitate, and it was the hesitation that would really cause a turnover. It was just a weird game. I don't expect to see games like that very often from the Hoosiers.
Yeah, and another way to think about it is if you do have a bad game, it's almost okay for it to come against a really good team because, hey, a team like Ohio State, you might play your best and still end up losing. So I definitely expect IU to come out on fire Wednesday night. That could be later tonight if you're listening to this podcast on Wednesday. The Hoosiers are 4.5-point favorites. Matt, IU won both games of the series last year. Minnesota is a prickly team. They're solid. They know what they're doing. How do you think this game goes? Who wins and by how much?
Yeah, I like IU in this, and my really educated, well thought out answer to the why I like it is that the ESPN matchup predictor has a 69% chance to win, and so I think that's pretty nice.
Yeah,
so
nice. Yeah, nice.
That's why we're gonna win. We should win this game, I think, by 7 or 8 points. It'll be like a 4-point game, and then we'll end up winning, shooting some clutch free throws. I know. Ugh. Ooh, scary. Shooting free throws. I know.
Shiver just went down my spine.
I know. But we'll win this game by 8 points. I think it'll be like a 68-60 kind of game.
Yeah, I've got IU winning this game also. I think the final's going to be something like, a little more high scoring. I can see this being like a 72-65 type of win for Indiana. Minnesota's kind of slumping a bit. Okay, they beat Nebraska earlier this month, but they're coming off of getting stomped at Maryland. They lost 72-59. They didn't play all that well against Purdue last Thursday, and I watched a good chunk of that game. It was one of those tea time starts once again that happened between Minnesota and Purdue. And the Gophers just strung together really strong last 5-6 minutes to come back and win. And that should set off alarms in Indiana's head. Hey, even if you're up 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 points with 4, 5, 6 minutes to go, don't let your foot off the gas pedal. Keep going. I liked your point about the free throws, actually. I know I joked about the shiver down my spine, but Indiana's a team that showed, especially if they send guys like Al Durham and Armon Franklin to the line, it looks like Race Thompson's getting better from the stripe. That should set up Indiana in a good spot to close out the Gophers on Wednesday night. Let's quickly shout out our social media for Indiana HQ. Once again, folks, we're going to have people at the game on Wednesday. We're going to have our friend Jevin, who's occasionally been on this podcast and more frequently recently. He's going to be covering the game at Assembly Hall. And you can follow us at Indiana HQ on Twitter, as well as at indiana.hq on Instagram. And make sure you head over to YouTube and follow us and like us and subscribe and like our videos and do all that sort of thing, because we're going to be your one-stop shop for everything related to this basketball team until the season ends, whenever that is, wherever that is. We have people credentialed to go cover the games. We have people who are constantly on social media and churning out articles like recaps and things like that. Our lineup analysis is great. I love our power rankings that come out every Friday, and you can get all this by heading over to indianahq.com, as well as following us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. All right. Michigan State on Saturday, man. Indiana's not faced the Spartans yet this year. They were supposed to play earlier this season in East Lansing. That game got postponed. We have heard absolutely nothing about a potential rescheduling of either that game or the earlier game against Michigan. We haven't heard anything. I don't think you can rule out the possibility of maybe IU and Michigan State playing twice coming up at some point, like a Saturday, Sunday or a Saturday, Monday type deal. I am just speculating. I am just spitballing and brainstorming. I don't know how intent the Big Ten is on having every team play 20 games. The only reason I'm mentioning the back-to-back thing is because that's what Maryland and Nebraska are doing tonight and on Tuesday and on Wednesday. They're playing 2 games, same site. It's strange. It's weird, but that's what the pandemic has created. Archie owns Tom Izzo, Matt. Ken Palm likes IU 69-63. I hope Tom Izzo wasn't listening to when I said that. But facts only. Facts only. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Ranked team. Offense is 100th. Defense is 39th. They're a bit like the Stanford team that IU played earlier this year. Mm-hmm. Matt, who are the guys that IU fans need to watch out for on this Michigan State team? No longer is Cassius Winston there. No longer is Xavier Tillman there. Who are one or two of the key players we got to watch for on Michigan State, and what does IU have to do to win?
Sure. First 2 right off the top of my head. Aaron Henry, Joey Hauser. Those are 2. And Rocket Watts is a name to remember. Those 3, probably you're going to be safe knowing that most of their possessions are going to go through those 3. Aaron Henry from the Indianapolis area, I feel like he should have been an IU player, but we're not going to talk about that. Averages 14.3 per game. Joey Hauser's a transfer from Marquette. We beat his butt 2 years ago, so he might be out for some revenge. And then Rocket Watts gave us a little bit of trouble last year when we played him. Came off the bench. Is a really, really good scorer. He can score in bunches when given the opportunity to do so. I like IU in this game, though. I think it's a really good matchup for us. Again, like you said, a really apt comparison is the Stanford team that we played earlier in the year. I feel like they'd have the same record as Stanford if they played in the Pac-12, which means they would be in a little bit better standing than they would be in the Big Ten. Wow. So I like us to win this game by a good sizable margin. Like you said, Archie owns Izzo. Yeah. So I'm going to say like a 12 or 14-point win. This might be our biggest win of the season outside of Northern Alabama or some of the early cupcake games that we played.
Man, Indiana doesn't blow teams out. Come on now.
I know, but I think that this is the game in which they do that. They'll have some confidence coming off the win against Minnesota, which will be a tough-fought game. And I think Michigan State will be slumping at this point, playing a lot of games in a row, and coming into IU and Assembly Hall and Izzo having a hard time against Archie. It's just a lot of factors there.
How about the middle of the stretch that Michigan State is in? They had a bunch of games postponed because of COVID-19, but starting last Saturday, they had home Iowa, all right, and they lost by 30. In case you missed it, Iowa won that game last Saturday, 88-58. Michigan State had to go to Purdue tonight, and it looks like they lost officially here 75-65 to the Boilermakers just now. The game just went final as we recorded. Saturday, they've got to come to Bloomington. A few days later, they return home to face Illinois, and then home Ohio State, and then at Maryland, and then home Michigan. All right, cool.
That's such a
no,
tough stretch.
no big deal, and we don't know if any other rescheduled games will pop up in there. I liked your comments though, as far as Joey Hauser, as far as Aaron Henry. Henry and Hauser, by the way, come off the bench right now. As Tom Izzo doesn't necessarily start his 5 best players, he tries to see which guys fit, which guys mix, which guys work correctly in which sequence. With that said, they could very well start on Saturday in this noon Eastern ESPN start. I also do want to give a mention to Josh Langford. He's a senior. He's struggled through some injuries. He's capable of being the best player on a good Michigan State team. Obviously, MSU's not as good right now, and Langford is struggling to sort of return to that level he was at before his injuries. But he's always capable of putting up a 15 or 20-point performance in your face. Their offense is a mess. They have one of the least efficient offenses in the Big Ten. They've broken just 70 points just 3 times in Big Ten play. MSU's a good rebounding team.
Always happen.
So you do have to keep them off the glass. They don't necessarily have one particular guy who, stacks the rebounds up like Trace Jackson-Davis and Race Thompson do for Indiana. I think Hauser's their leading rebounder in Big Ten play at something like 5.2 or 5.3, which I saw was 25th in the conference. So it's not like they have one guy who's crushing. It's a committee effort. I do think Indiana's going to win. I think it's going to be a close game, though. Like I said, Indiana doesn't blow teams out. I don't see it changing here on Saturday. I think it's going to be an ugly, low-scoring game. 62-58. That's what I've got. It's going to be one of those hard-to-watch, defense-loving type of games. That's putting it nicely, as Indiana will face the Spartans here and try to string together back-to-back wins. They did it last week. They lost to Ohio State. They're going to try to string together 2 wins. No mistake about it, right, man? We've just got to say it like it is. They've got to go 2-0 this week. There are no excuses unless there's something horrible that happens to this team. They've got to go 2-0.
Yeah, they're shooting themselves in the foot if they don't. Like asking them to get a win in Mackey against Purdue when they haven't won in like 5 years, it's gonna be tough. Winning against Michigan, even though I said we match up well against them. When I say we match up well against them, I mean it won't be a blowout. That's what I mean. They're a really good team. They're a battle-tested team at this point. I don't expect us to go and win that game. Rutgers always gives us trouble. So having to win one of those next 3 is going to be rough. So winning these 2 games, basically to me, you're sitting at 13-9 and a first-round win in the Big Ten tournament, and you're in the tournament with like a 10 or 11 seed. Yeah. You lose one of these next 2 games, or both of them, God forbid, you lose both of them. Yeah. You're looking at a possible losing record going into the Big Ten tournament, needing a win or 2 to secure your spot in the tournament.
Yeah, no, that's a good way of putting it. That's the mathematical part, right? When you do the back of the napkin, Sharpie numbers. As far as I think of it, though, if you lose one of these next 2 games, you lose the fan base too. And there are and I know there's a narrative out there that Indiana fans are apathetic and Indiana fans have quit on this team, and there might be some of them that have. But all in all, like if I go and look at our social media interaction and engagement, IU fans get up for these games, no matter what hour of the night they're played at. And Indiana fans ride the roller coaster with this team, and you're just going to lose more of them if you drop even one of these games. One question I want to ask you, Matt, before we wind things down: how much do style points matter to you, and how much should they matter? Like Indiana, I casually just joke like they don't blow out teams, and I'm not so sure we should accept that. Should style points matter this week? Should Indiana be going out and trying to win by 10, or should they just be going out and trying to win no matter what it takes?
Yeah, I can see both sides of the argument here. I like to just win. I think it feels good to win games. So I don't care how you win it. Like, it can be the rough, defensive, turnover-filled, eyes-bleeding basketball fest that is classic Big Ten basketball. Sprinkling a little bit of bad refereeing in there as well, and cook it all up. You got some beautiful Midwestern Big Ten basketball. Or I also like it when I watch my team, and for the last 10 minutes of the game, I'm enjoying us riding out a win. That's an enjoyable experience that I only get to feel when we play cupcakes or we're watching a football game. So I can see both sides there. However, I would enjoy to just win 2 games. I don't care if it goes to triple, quadruple, quintuple overtime.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
I don't care if we have to play.
Be careful what you wish for, man.
I don't care if we have to play 3 games worth of time. And the score is like 275, 270.
Oh, wow.
I will enjoy every second of the win afterwards.
Oh, man. What was it? Syracuse and UConn that played the 6-0 game, Big East tournament?
Game. I remember staying up and watching that game. That was a college basketball classic.
Yeah, it was a really good one. I was at a hotel somewhere. I don't remember where, but I stayed up all night and watched that. I was doing some sort of springtime travel. I was right with you until about, I don't know, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago when the NCAA started saying we're going to explicitly adopt things like net rankings and the KenPom ratings, the computer systems that care a whole lot about margin, scoring margin. And look, Indiana doesn't lose many games by 15 or 20 points. But if you ask me, they don't win nearly enough games by 15 or 20 points. And I think if you're Archie Miller this week, behind the scenes, if you're this Indiana basketball team, you've got to go out this week and not just settle for the win. And I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, especially in a year where Indiana values every Big Ten win that they get. Go for that 10, 15, 20-point blowout win. Heck, Maryland did that to Minnesota earlier. Actually, it happened this past Sunday. And Michigan State lost by 30 to Iowa on Saturday. Okay, both your opponents this week are a little vulnerable. Both of your teams are not as tough as maybe a Purdue is or Rutgers is, never mind those teams at the top of the conference. So as far as I'm concerned, I want to see some style points this week. Then again, if you expect that to happen, I hope I'm wrong. We'll see how it goes. All right, Matt, your closing thoughts tonight. We covered a lot of ground. Indiana went 1-1 last week. They've got to go 2-0 this week. What else? Yeah, well, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I would like to see 2 wins. That's all I'm asking is 2 wins in a row. I don't think I'm asking a lot, but this team hasn't won or lost 2 games in a row in a very long time. It just seems like we're just going in this, cycle of madness. But yeah, some consistency would be nice. I just like 2 wins, even if it's consistently awful basketball that I'm watching. I just want to know what I can expect anymore. I'd like to see some more minutes from Lander. We talked about lineup changes. I don't think the lineup's going to change because Archie's a stubborn man.
At least as far as the Minnesota game, nothing. It's not happening. At least in Minnesota.
No, it's not happening for Minnesota. I still wouldn't even want to see it for the Michigan State game. I just don't think we'd work. However, I would like to see Hunter get a little bit more minutes, especially after his recent play. I'd like to see Christian Lander get some minutes. I'd also like to see Leal get some more minutes. Galloway hasn't been cutting it recently, so I'd like to see Leal in there. And then hopefully, I know there's been some articles on him. I would like to see our beautiful, beautiful transfer get in the game, and hopefully maybe Joey get back in. Hunter Stewart.
Parker Stewart.
Hunter Stewart.
I think Hunter's
I was thinking about Hunter. Twilight? I was thinking about Hunter Dickinson.
Oh, I see.
He's transferring. Congratulations to us! Wow,
must be nice.
Breaking news. No, but hopefully seeing Parker Stewart or getting some news about him would be nice. Getting into the rotation because I think he can bring a lot to the team.
Yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye out for that. One quick note on Galloway. He is dealing with the thing with his back. That definitely could be contributing to some of his struggles recently. Also, forgot to mention this matchup against Minnesota. You always have to talk about it. Race Thompson is where he's from. It's always got that little extra motivation when he plays the Gophers. As far as my closing thoughts, like I said this earlier, Indiana, take more threes. Let's go. I mean, unless there's someone in your face contesting the heck out of it and blocking them, you've got guys who can hit threes off the dribble. You got guys who can definitely hit threes in a catch and shoot spot up scenario. I want to see Indiana take at least 15 against Minnesota. I want to see them take at least 20 against Michigan State. Minnesota doesn't allow too many, so that's why my number's a little lower for that game against the Gophers. But I want to see IU go out there and take them. Indiana basketball's been all about shooting the three-pointer, ever since the line was adopted. So go out there, hit your threes. The math works better in your favor when you do that sort of thing. It makes your life a little bit easier too. And heck, you might even go out and win a game by 10 or 15 points. So that about wraps it up for our 182nd show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Thank you to our live audience. You guys are all beautiful people, especially thanks to those of you who answered and commented to our Twitter poll. I hope all of you were happy with getting a shout out on our podcast tonight. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you just heard, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ as well as at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But, as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
Peace and love. Let's get those